My World War II experiences really began not in 1943 when I entered the service, but really in 1941. In 1941, I entered Wake Forest College to get an education and hopefully play a little baseball. And the thing about Wake Forest in my education, I loved history, but I wasn't very good at remembering dates. And there were 3 dates that really changed my life: December the 7th, June the 6th, and October the 23rd. One day, on Sunday afternoon, on December the 7th, someone came in my dormitory room to tell us there'd been a sneak attack on Pearl Harbor by the Japanese. They attacked all the ships that were in the harbor, American ships, and destroyed many. The next day, President Roosevelt declared war on Japan, and the next day Germany declared war on the United States. I did not go in the Army right away. This was in 1941. I got to play baseball in 1942. At that particular time, freshmen did not play varsity sports. So when I was on the freshman team, I was catcher on the team and played many games. The last base hit I ever got in a collegiate game was on Emerson Field in Chapel Hill. That was sometime in either April or May of '42. I was supposed to go in the Army sometime early in fall of '42, but the draft board exempted me so I could finish the first semester, which ended in January of 1943. In January, sometime in January after that first semester, I entered the service, was drafted, went to Fort Bragg, was there a few days, not knowing where I would go. I remember being interviewed by, it so happened to be someone from my hometown, Waitsboro, a guy by the name of Donnie Huntley, who later on would work with me at CP&L many years later. But when he interviewed me, he was a retired school teacher. He asked me what I wanted to do, and I told him, I said, I'd like to go to Camp Davis, North Carolina, and stay around here. He said, I'll see what I could do, what he could do. The next day I was on a troop train headed for Texas, a long way from Camp Davis. I went to Camp Swift, Texas, which is halfway between Austin and San Antonio. Camp Swift was built by Lyndon Johnson's father-in-law, and it was the beginning of the wealth of the Johnsons' wife's fortune. They built this camp, and then later on used money to buy radio stations and TV stations. I got my basic training in Camp Swift. Was there through basic training, then I remember going to Louisiana on maneuvers, around Shreveport, Louisiana. It was cold that fall of '43. In Texas, it was just cold as it could be. You think about it being warm, but really it was colder than I anticipated. Went to Louisiana, stayed there a few months. In fact, I was there about 6 weeks, not really, but just a month and a half. And then went to Fort Leonard, Missouri, which was not far from St. Louis. I was there a few months and had further training. I remember going to St. Louis. I had an uncle who lived in St. Louis, and I remember going to see my Uncle Shaw in St. Louis. Came back and hadn't been there long. This was in late '43. And I knew that they were getting ready to break up the division I was in at that time to send troops either to North Africa or to Europe. Sometime in early 1944, I shipped out from Fort Leonard and went to Camp Kilmer, New Jersey. And while I was there, I visited New York several times. There was an old girlfriend of mine who was in school in New York at the time named Muriel Robinson. And I went to see her a couple of times. And then later on, we got shipping orders. And they got on the Queen Mary. And there were thousands of us on this boat. One of the biggest boat or ship in the world, I suppose, at that time. And it was a boat that did not have to be in a convoy. It could zigzag across the Atlantic Ocean. It didn't take us but 5.5 days to go from New York to Scotland. We landed in Glasgow, Scotland, the Bertha Firth. Caught a train there and went to the Salisbury Plain, near where Stonehenge is located. And there's a church there, Salisbury Church Cathedral. My future wife and I went to that very spot years later. I went to a camp that had been a British camp in the plain of Salisbury. I was there for a while and was assigned to the 29th Infantry Division. The 29th Infantry Division had been in England for over a year. It was the first division to go to England and stay the entire time before the invasion. It was a Virginia, Maryland National Guard division. We did a lot of training, realized that we were going into Europe, not knowing where, but we practiced a lot of dry runs, landing, and so forth. And sometime, I suppose it was in late May or maybe middle of May, they moved all the troops to the shores of England and moved all the people who lived in those areas out of the way because they didn't want any spies in there or anything. And my outfit went to Plymouth, England. There are a lot of other places along the coast that other divisions went to. The plan was to land at that time on June the 5th on the shores of Normandy. It had been planned that the 1st Division, the 29th Division, would land on what they called Omaha Beach. The 4th Division landed on what was called Utah Beach. I was in the 115th Infantry Regiment. Each division at that time had 3 regiments. The 115th, which was the Maryland National Guard. In fact, the company that I joined, 90%, well 80% at least, were from Cumberland, Maryland. And that's the outfit I joined. The 116th was the Maryland Division, also around Baltimore. The 116th Division was the Virginia National Guard Division. And fortunately, the regiment that was chosen to lead the attack in the 29th Division was the 116th Infantry Regiment from Virginia. Most of them were from around Roanoke, Virginia, Bedford, Virginia, and that part of the state of Virginia. Did not land on the 5th because the weather was so bad. But I recall on June the 4th going to a chapel service where the chaplain spoke to us and we had communion, and he took his text from the book of Romans. It dealt with nothing can separate you from the love of God. I do not rightly remember the chapter in Romans, but that's where it came from. I remember it all my life. I've got it in a little Bible my mother sent me, a little testament. It's the only thing I still have that went with me the whole time during the war. And I've got it highlighted in there. Anyway, we went to that chapel service. And I remember the chaplain. He was not a Baptist. I think he was Catholic, but I'm not sure. He was a nice man. I saw him several times. I'd seen him several times before and saw him several times later. Unfortunately, about 6 weeks after that, he was killed in action by artillery fire.